Welcome to the ChargePoint podcast, brought to you by Flexecharge, your gateway to the future of EV charging. In each episode, we dive deep into the world of EV infrastructure, offering insights and perspectives from industry leaders, innovators, and the people at the forefront of deploying charging solutions and networks. Join us to explore the exciting developments that are accelerating our world towards sustainable mobility.
Welcome to a new episode of the ChargePoint podcast. Today we have a special guest in the studio, Matt Stace from Tritium. Matt has been at the forefront of the e-mobility revolution in the past 4 years, helping to shape the fast charging landscape across the Nordic region. But how did a long career at IBM lead him to the world of EV charging, and what made him take the leap from IT to e-mobility? In this episode, we dig into Matt's journey and try to answer some big questions. What are the biggest challenges when scaling fast charging infrastructure? How do government policies shape the industry? And what can other regions learn from the Nordics' approach to EV adoption? We, of course, also go behind the scenes as Tritium, one of the pioneers of DC fast charging. How did they go from a small Australian startup to secure major deals with major CPOs like Ionity? What innovations have set them apart in such a competitive space? And with recent financial hurdles and Tritium's acquisition by Exicom, what's next for the company? This episode is packed with insights into the future of EV charging, the lessons learned from the most advanced markets, and what it takes to succeed in an industry evolving at lightning speed. So plug in, stay tuned, and let's dive into the conversation with Matt. And welcome to a new episode of the ChargePoint podcast. I have a very special guest in the hot seat today, visiting us at our office in Frederiksberg, Denmark. Welcome, Matt from Tritium.
Thanks very much, Christoph. It's great to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to drop by. We have some really interesting topics ahead of us. Let's start by really, of course, a thorough introduction of yourself. So can you please give us your origin story? What's your background?
Yeah, look, I've been in the e-mobility industry for around about 4 years. I started with Tritium in Australia and then moved across here to manage sales across the Nordic region for Tritium. What led me to e-mobility? I was prior to that, I was working for IBM for around about 20 years. And during that time, coming towards the end of my time at IBM, it was very obvious to me that humans are driving climate change, and I wanted to be part of the solution rather than continuing to contribute to the problem. And so as I began thinking of, life after IBM, I was looking for companies that were contributing to fighting climate change and, improving the sustainability of, everything that humans do. And in that search, I came across Tritium, which frankly was 5 minutes down the road from my house in Brisbane. But they were, at the time when I first became aware of them, they were making very significant inroads. And I would say at that point were definitely a global leader.
Yes, we'll come back to that, absolutely.
In e-mobility. Everything was designed and at that stage manufactured in Australia. And so I approached them and, one thing led to another. And eventually I got the opportunity to move to Copenhagen with them to represent them in the Nordic markets. That was a dream come true for me. I had lived here once before. I did a year of university here. I have some Danish heritage. In fact, I've come to actually meet some Danes that I'm related to, and now having lived here, that I was never aware of before. So Fantastic. It has been a full circle sort of journey from a personal perspective, as well as transformational journey from a professional perspective. I've loved the opportunity to live and work here.
Yeah, well, I think you're not the only one sharing that desire to make things. To make things better, we're certainly all helping with this industry. Yeah, that's why we're here. just a question on maybe relating to your cultural background as an Australian working in mobility in Europe. What unique challenges and opportunities have you faced?
That's a good question. So from a challenge perspective, I think the challenges have been more personal than professional. My wife and my two sons have moved here with me. That's been a huge sacrifice on their behalf. It's also been a great opportunity for them to live abroad, and something that I had been working towards for a very long time, but it had eluded me while I was at IBM. So from a challenge perspective, as I said, more personal than professional. I've had an incredible time in terms of what I've been able to achieve for Tritium in the Nordic market, and especially in Denmark. From an opportunity perspective, getting back to your question, as an Australian, one of the things that I love about working in Europe is that there's an incredible focus on sustainability, not just in the societies, but also by the governments, or especially by the governments. That was something that was really missing, I felt, in Australia. Australian society recognises the reality of climate change and is committed. We've got more solar rooftop systems per capita than anywhere else globally. Right. So the people are voting with their wallets and with their hearts and minds. But until a couple of years ago, the government that had been in power in Australia for more than 10 years was in climate denial. And so the most inspiring part about working here has been seeing how society and governments work together towards fighting climate change, and e-mobility is a perfect example of that. So that's been really great. The other thing I think, as an Australian, that I've enjoyed most is Australia's got a population of 26 million people. That's probably more than all of the Nordics combined, and yet it's one culture, it's one society, it's one sort of federal government system. And there's one set of players. The opportunity I have here, which is also a challenge, is that operating across all of the Nordic markets, each one of those has their own ecosystem, their own set of players, their own government policies, different languages, although English is spoken very widely, and that's actually been really interesting. So I've had a very interesting time working across multiple markets like that, seeing how different governments are approaching the incentive process of incentives and building out the network. So that's been great.
Probably. And you went from a I would say slow market like Australia, laggard, to one of the most advanced and ahead of the curve, right?
Absolutely.
So that's really exciting. Couldn't be a better small region to work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I left Australia in November 2021, I went to my local VW dealership to have a look at some electric cars. They didn't even sell electric cars back then. And so, I think the word laggard was definitely the correct description. It is catching up. And fortunately, there's the experience to draw from in so many markets across Europe that Australia can probably, and other markets, of course, can probably avoid some of the mistakes that have been made and learnt from in more advanced markets like Denmark and the rest of the Nordics.
That could be absolutely a topic. I like to find out about new topics for future episodes when I'm recording some. We should make one on the Australian market, and also have some interesting contacts who are living down under. And with your thoughts as an Australian here, we could make a great episode, I'm sure.
Great.
So let's go back to the time when you stepped in at Tritium. So how successful was Tritium? You were talking about they were already on a roll, so to speak. So how defining was Tritium for the industry back then?
Yeah, so look, Tritium, I would describe Tritium very firmly as a pioneer, especially in DC charging. We only build DC charging systems. The origin of Tritium is quite an inspiring story. It was started by 3 university students that were working together in a solar racing car team. Every 3 years, there's a solar car race, 3,000 kilometres across the Australian outback. Some of the most harsh and hot and unforgiving terrain anywhere in the world.
Yes.
And they were really successful with a particular component that they built, which they ended up selling to most of the other teams. So they were specialists in power electronics, and they engaged in a whole range of, tens and tens of different power electronics engineering projects over probably the next 10 years. And I'll give you an example of some of them because it sort of illustrates how tritium technology is being tested. We like to say tritium technology is being tested in the hottest, the coldest, the highest, and the deepest places on Earth. So the hottest was the Australian outback. The highest, we provided some type of power electronics system for a Google plane that used to broadcast internet over remote regions. The coldest, there was some type of battery system that was provided to Antarctica. And in terms of deepest, the founders of Tritium built the battery management system that went into James Cameron's electric submarine that went to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So our technology has been tested in all sorts of very harsh environments. At the end of, at some point, the founders decided they better pivot to a market segment that they could really make some money from. And so to that end, they settled on DC charging. So they actually developed what I believe is the world's first 50 kilowatt DC charging system. That was released back in about 2013, 2014. A few years later, they were approached by what's now Ionity, and they were asked to specifically develop the world's first 350 kilowatt charging system. And that led to a multi-million-dollar order. There's now over 1,500 of those 350 kilowatt charging systems installed all across Europe. And so that was a sort of only a couple of years. That's around about the time I became aware of Tritium, for a couple of years before I eventually approached them. But they were absolutely pioneers in DC charging.
And were they spotted and celebrated in Australia as a growing business?
Yeah, very much so. Not so much sponsored. Like, I don't think there was really any government support, but I became aware of them reading about them in the newspaper, and I actually set up a Google alert to notify me anytime there was any sort of media article about them. Because, as I said prior, I was really interested in working for a company that was providing solutions that would aid, humanity's sustainability. And so the fact that it was high technology, that it was developed in Australia, and it was, focused on the sort of outcomes that it's focused on, it was a really attractive business for me to look at. So, like I said, I couldn't believe it when the opportunity finally came for me to represent them here in the Nordics, and it was an opportunity I could not say no to. So.
Fantastic, I can see that. So, so those were the heydays, the multi-million-dollar deals with Ionity. Any other big achievement that Tritium made in the early 20s in terms of deployment of a solution across Europe that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Nordics in general, quite apart from what we did with Ionity across multiple markets in Europe, as you know, Norway was and still in many ways is the pioneer of the EV industry. And so some of my predecessors had been quite successful selling Tritium technology, 50 kilowatt chargers, into Norway. So at one point, I think there was almost 1,000 of those 50 kilowatt chargers installed by multiple different CPOs all across Norway. Some of those, many of those have been uninstalled, but there's still quite a few there, which sort of demonstrate the longevity of the product. So that was Tritium was quite successful early on, right across the Nordics.
Yeah, and then came early 24. Big challenges, tough times. What kind of reflections do you have on? Yeah, can you share a bit of your reflection on this phase?
Yeah, so on the back of the growth that had come out of Ionity, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in the US. So whereas Tritium's main market had been Europe, it did see a huge opportunity in the US. We had never had an office, or at that point, I don't think we'd had an office. So Tritium, shortly after they went through an IPO or a SPAC listing on the NASDAQ, announced that they were going to build a factory in the US. And in fact, all of our manufacturing has now pivoted to the US. We've closed our factory in Australia. And I think, Tritium bet very big on the US market, probably well before any of our competitors, and bet big on the basis of growth, which I don't think has really ever eventuated. And that did create some financial challenges for Tritium, which sort of came home to roost last year. And so Tritium's been through a pretty tough time. Tritium and our clients, I must say, have been through a pretty tough time over the last 12 months, which resulted in the assets of the business being bought by Exicom. And that's really given us a second chance. And I feel really, really fortunate that has happened, because that doesn't always happen. When a business goes through what we've been through, the future is very uncertain, and in many cases there is no future. So I'm really grateful that Exicom has decided to leverage the technology that we have and invest to bring new versions of that technology to market. So
can you maybe tell us a bit more about Exicom as an owner? What company is it?
Yeah, so Exicom is based in India. They've been in business about 30 years. 90% of their business. So they're fully focused on power electronics, but 90% of their business is focused on providing backup power solutions for telecommunications companies. 10% of their business, roughly, is focused on EV charging, both DC and AC. And so they saw the opportunity, and most of that is in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. So they saw the opportunity to buy the technology and underlying assets of Tritium as an incredible opportunity to expand their business globally. And so they have made the decision to focus on selling, to leverage and focus on selling the Tritium brand in Europe and also in the US. I don't believe they have any plans to sell the Exicom brand in those two markets. We already have an established brand name. We have an established customer base.
Absolutely.
We have, people and processes and
lots of equity.
Yeah, that's right. So, so that's where we are now. And look, they're making some great investments. There's a lot of work to do. I'm happy to go through some of the stuff that they're doing to help us return to the leadership position that we did have.
Absolutely, we want to hear about that. Yeah, but the whole you could say this dip or this inflection point where suddenly things go wrong reminds me, and you're right, you don't always have a second chance, but luckily I think in our industry is so promising that those are downturns which have to be overcome, and luckily I think there's capital out there that is interested. I think not later than was the day before yesterday, so now we're in week 4 when we're recording, that EVBox's DC business was also, you saw probably that the news, was acquired, which is great. I think it would be a huge loss to have just sunken cost company disappearing after years of great work, just because maybe, again, they were early starters. And it seems like the earlier you started, the more difficult you get this kind of period. And then you have to rise from the challenges. But fantastic. So, so let's hear concretely. So what is Exicom? The money, for sure, smart money, definitely. It's not just some kind of random group. They're really into this industry already. So how are they helping Tritium to get to the next stage?
Yeah, so I think the thing that attracted Exicom to Tritium was our underlying technology. We have only ever built liquid-cooled DC chargers. There are another couple of players now who do have modules that are liquid-cooled. But that liquid cooling technology provides a whole range of benefits to operators that Exicom is very keen to leverage. Most notably, a low cost of ownership. We've always designed our own modules, our own power modules. So it's proprietary technology, and we've made a decision that I don't believe anybody else has made, which is to split or to keep separate the AC/DC module from the DC/DC module. To my knowledge, all of our competitors, yes, they're two separate processes, but they build them into a single power module. And we've taken the decision on our modular products to keep those two processes in two separate modules, and there's reasons for that. We believe it creates a greater level of redundancy in the system, so that if one of those processes fails, the other can continue independent of the one that's failed, so that there's greater resilience. It also gives us flexibility in how we build and architect the system that none of our competitors have. And one of our products at the moment takes advantage of that. The next product, which we're going to launch in probably the next quarter, really takes advantage of that at much higher power levels than we've ever delivered before. And so Exicom really saw the value in that technology and is prepared to invest. We were continuing, a lot of the work on that was sort of put on hold last year, but after Exicom took ownership of the business, they gave the green light to further investment to bring that next product to market. So that's the first thing, is leveraging our already strong technology. The second is bringing new leadership in. So we've just got a new CEO, just started before Christmas. He has a very strong focus on client needs, and I do think that was one of the things that had been lacking in Tritium 1.0, if we can call it that. So I think that's a really positive thing. And then, when talking to people about what Tritium 2.0 or how Tritium 2.0 is developing, I always say that Exicom is investing in the people, the processes, and the product. So in terms of people, we lost many people last year.
I can imagine, yeah.
Some of them were cut for financial reasons. Others decided to leave because of the financial uncertainty of staying at Tritium.
Understandable.
And so we are recruiting to refill those roles. In some cases, not exactly the same role, but we've been given a second chance, and we need to do things differently. So some of the people or some of the roles that we're employing are different.
Are they open positions at Tritium right now?
Yes, they absolutely are.
We'll put the link to the career page in the show notes.
Okay,
for sure.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. And we're recruiting, globally. Our R&D center and all of our engineering, mechanical, electrical, and software engineering is all in Australia. But we've got, our production is all in the US, so there's many jobs there that we're advertising. We've got sales jobs, all across the US and some in Europe as well. So it's an exciting time to join.
Exciting time, yes. So people.
So people, processes. I say sometimes that money is the lubricant of business, and by that I mean, when you don't have money, a lot of the gears grind to a halt, and that certainly happened last year. But with an injection of new funds, Exicom is investing to both bring back the processes that were already, that existed in Tritium 1.0, but more importantly, reinvent some of those processes so that we do things different and do them better than we did first time round. And the last is around products. So I mentioned, at one point we were clear leaders at 50 kilowatt and 350 kilowatt. We had both of those products before basically any of our competitors. But we have fallen, there's no denying we've fallen behind that curve over the last couple of years. But as part of their due diligence process, Exicom saw the product that we're going to bring to market and realized how incredibly suitable it is for the next generation of what's going to happen in the e-mobility industry, which we can talk about more. And so they're investing to bring that to bear. So if I can just give a short snapshot of our product range. At our low end, we have all-in-one systems. We don't have any high-power charging all-in-one systems like some of our competitors. What we decided to do was, as the power levels increased, we changed the architecture. So our what I would call our mid-tier power level, around 150 kilowatts, that's actually what we call a distributed system, where we have a centralized rectifier, which converts the AC to the DC. And then we distribute that DC power through a microgrid to what we call charging stations that have all the DC modules inside them. So they control how much power then goes out to the vehicle. As we look at this next generation of product that we're going to bring to market, we're going to bring a much higher power level than we have ever brought out. And in fact, I would say from a CCS perspective, it's higher than any of our competitors currently offer. CCS seems to have capped out at about 480 kilowatts, I think, is the highest on one of our competitors from a CCS plug perspective. Of course, they're all bringing MCS to market, and that is in our roadmap. But right now, we're focusing on higher power CCS, and so that system will be higher power than is available on the market today. Incredibly more scalable than any system that's available on the market today. Very flexible, and also focused on keeping the cost of the TCO as low as possible.
Yeah.
So
sounds like an interesting it's a good teaser. Thank you for showing the teaser. We'll see more in some months.
Yeah, the next few months you'll hear more. I'd be happy to come back and talk about it, because it is, as I say, it's a very different system to anything that our competitors have brought to market so far.
Yeah. So if we look at market focus, I think competition is tough, as you said, and so it's not enough to just have great technology. It's also being sharp on your positioning in the segments that you're going after. So can you maybe speak a bit into the focus area for Tritium as a DC charger provider on the CPO market? How do you see it?
Yeah, so there's probably three areas that I think there's a great opportunity for us to pursue, especially with the new product. Because we had not had a new high power charging product for the last multiple years, I would say, we have not really participated in that truck charging market. The product that I talked about earlier, with the much higher power levels, much greater levels of flexibility and scalability in the system, I think lends itself especially to two segments: truck charging. So that's certainly an area that we expect to be successful in. And second is more around depot charging, either for buses or for logistics companies, not necessarily with heavy vehicles or semi-trailers.
Last mile.
Exactly. So again, the flexibility of our new system, with its ability to deploy many plugs within a single load balanced system, really opens up an opportunity for us to pursue and be successful in that market, which we have not had the right product to do, I think, ever. And then the third area is all around battery connected systems. anyone can connect a battery to a Tritium charger today. All of those systems today are architected in a way that they're fed by AC, AC power. Our new system, without going into too much detail on how the power modules work together, it will be possible for clients to feed a DC source of power, whether it's a battery or solar or some type of DC microgrid, can feed DC power directly into the DC bus of that system. So that's a competitive advantage we have because of the way that we've designed our power modules that none of our competitors have. All of our competitors, if they're going to integrate their system with a battery, will need the DC power from the battery to be converted back to AC, fed into the system, then reconverted back to DC before it eventually gets to the vehicle. The system that we're going to bring to market will allow the DC power to be fed directly into the DC bus. So there'll be zero conversion losses as part of that system. So that's I think it's an industry first, and I think it's a real advantage for customers who are grid challenged or looking to be more how do I say it? To be more creative on how they're using their power. I mean, having a battery in your system in some countries is an absolute necessity. We look
it is becoming. We know that,
the Netherlands, the UK.
Yes.
There are most of the good sites are gone that had easy access to power and high traffic. It's becoming a necessity in many cases to link a battery to your system, and so the system, this new product that we're going to bring to market is an ideal fit for those sorts of environments where the grid power is challenged, or indeed someone like a distribution center who has access to a massive roof with solar PV. And they can afford to create their own DC microgrid that can be fed directly into our system as well, without any need to be, converting back to AC and then into DC again. Yeah. So that's I think an important and a growing segment of the market that this product will address directly.
Yeah, sounds really promising. I mean, of course, I can only concur on the rise of the batteries, and I think we talked about that in many episodes. And we as a company, we see that, that it's, it can play a different role. Certainly, grid limitation. And then it could be that in the Nordics, about having batteries to do arbitrage, so filling them up and making extra revenues, serving some time to boost if you need it when there's an extremely high demand, still being able to buy high power charger on your 16 plugs, for example, and you would need some battery. And if you on top can remove the conversion loss, then sounds really interesting. Yeah, definitely. But that's to be continued.
Yeah. So look, if I could summarize that, I think where the industry is heading, and this is why we've developed this product, is in stage one of the rollout of e-mobility. It seems to have been all about higher power. There are many CPOs that in their land grab have been focused on deploying the highest power available in the market, almost regardless of what the actual vehicles visiting that site will demand.
Ahead of the market almost.
Yeah, exactly. And that's fine if profit doesn't worry you. And the behavior of a lot of CPOs that I've observed almost indicates that profit is not a concern. Where I think the industry is going in the future is, yes, going to higher power, and yes, everyone's investing in MCS, probably except for the operators. There's not many MCS capable vehicles on the road at this point. I think where we're heading is smarter power, not just higher power, smarter power. You need to, because all the easy sites are gone, because of the characteristics of how of how you buy power from a grid and how you access power from a grid. it's important for operators to be smart about how they deploy charging infrastructure that allows them to make a profit, allows them to put infrastructure in locations where there is no grid or there's not a big enough grid connection to support, the demand from the potential customers. And also, as you say, participate in these grid flexibility services. I know that's a big thing across multiple markets in the Nordics. I'm actually not sure how big it is in other parts of Europe, but it's something that our customers are demanding, and having a battery attached to a system just enhances that ability to participate in those grid flexibility and power arbitrage markets, which do create an incredible extra revenue source for our cash-starved CPOs.
Absolutely, yeah. Exciting, absolutely. I really like the coining from higher power to smarter power. I think I'm gonna use it again. I like it, Matt. Thank you for that one. Yeah. So talking about smarter energy, we're super happy that we could announce very recently the certification of Tritium hardware. We have at Flexecharge this certification program, ensuring compatibility between our solutions. So we are super excited. Thanks again for reaching out and making this happen on both sides. Can you maybe tell us what you see in this collaboration? Why it was interesting for you to be certified, and what you see in our solution, how it can play along with this smarter energy?
Yeah, look, I've been really happy that we've been able to achieve that certification today. And the reason I think it's important is because of some of the things I just talked about in terms of the integration of battery systems. There's multiple there's probably about 3 use cases where I can see Flexecharge products and services contributing to or benefiting Tritium clients. The first is if a client has got multiple Tritium chargers on a single site, they can use your system to effectively cap the power that's drawn by those systems, to keep it below any sort of threshold which would otherwise trigger demand charges, which can be very, very expensive.
Prohibitive, yeah.
So that's the first. So when a customer is operating multiple standalone chargers, your system can orchestrate how power is shared between those otherwise standalone systems. The second is, if customers are running any systems, any of our different systems, not only our standalone, but our distributed system as well, on a site where there's other variable levels of power demand. For example, there might be a car wash, or there's some sort of heat pump or air conditioning system, refrigeration system in a store.
Solar, of course.
Yeah. So again, your system can orchestrate how power is shared across the whole site, again, to escape those excessive demand charges. But in terms of, so both of those are available already. Looking forward, if I go back to what I was just talking about in terms of having battery systems integrated, I can see many situations where clients are going to want to integrate sources of DC power, whether it's battery or solar, directly into this new system, this new Tritium system that we're going to announce shortly. And from what we've discussed, a lot of those sources of DC power are controlled via Modbus, which doesn't necessarily talk directly to, doesn't talk OCPP, which is the system, which is the language that our systems operate on and rely on for instruction. So having Flexecharge in the middle of that ecosystem allows us to connect virtually any battery system, or certainly any battery system that Flexecharge has certified with any of our systems, without the need for us to get involved and actually complete, whatever the scope of work is to tie those two systems together and make them talk. So you provide the orchestration layer in the middle, which gives customers a huge amount of flexibility on integrating whatever they've chosen as a DC power source directly with a Tritium charger, seamlessly without any sort of delay or
exactly.
need for integration.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the reason. That's a very strong reason why I'm very keen for our product to come out, because I think it's going to unlock a lot of opportunities to work with you and provide solutions to clients that are much easier than perhaps is otherwise the case.
Absolutely. Yeah, you couldn't say it better. I think, it's close to what we say. We say that we want to build together with partners, provide CPOs with, top of the shelf technology stacks, which are talking together and that are ready to work without any delays. So, and time to market is important too. You want to start to sell some kilowatt hours, right, as a CPO without waiting. So that's,
So smart power and fast power.
Totally. I think it's, more power until, to now smart power and more power. Fantastic. So what are your professional ambitions and resolution for 2025?
So good question. So, after everything that's happened in the last 12 months, I'm convinced that the future is bright for both our company and the business of our customers. Our customers and Tritium staff alike have had a very difficult year, but as I've outlined on this podcast, we're really focused on investing to enable the success of our clients, because we know when our clients are successful, then we will also be successful. So that's the first, is to win back the trust of our clients and demonstrate how we will support their business going forward. The second is probably a broader ambition to return Tritium to a leadership position. We were absolutely leaders at one point. That's not the case now, but we have incredible technology, differentiated technology, and I'm really excited to be able to hopefully unveil that in the next couple of months. And so, from an ambition perspective, I'm convinced that we'll see some of those systems deployed across the Nordics and further afield across other parts of Europe and the UK well before the end of the year. So that's something I'm looking forward to, and I'm looking forward to a journey with both our existing customers and new customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Let that be the last words. Matt, thank you again for dropping by today in the Sharp1 podcast, and wishing you an amazing afternoon and weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Christoph. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And that wraps up our conversation with Matt Stace from Tritium. We covered a lot of ground in this episode, from his personal journey, from IBM to e-mobility, to the challenges and opportunities of scaling EV charging infrastructure across different markets. One of the big takeaways? Well, the Nordic region continues to lead the way in sustainability and EV adoption, but as Matt pointed out, every market has its own unique challenges, whether it's government policy, grid capacity, or consumer behavior. We also get a fascinating look behind the scenes at Tritium, a true pioneer in DC fast charging, from its origin in Australia to rolling out 50 kilowatt and beyond fast charger with Ionity, for example. But perhaps the most important lesson is how quickly the industry is evolving. Tritium has faced some tough times recently with financial struggles and a shift in ownership, but as Matt shared, the acquisition by Exicom is opening new doors for the company and setting the stage for a fresh chapter. It will be extremely interesting to follow. So what's next for the EV charging space? If there's one thing we learned today, it's that adaptability is key. Whether you are a CPO, a charging solution provider, or a technology provider, staying ahead of the curve means embracing change and pushing for smarter, more efficient charging solutions. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Charge1 podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review, and follow me and Flexecharge for more deep dives into the world of EV charging. As always, if you have any suggestions for future guests from the industry, feel free to drop us an email at hello@flexecharge.com. Until our next episode, take care and drive safely.